Welcome to the Next Mountain podcast, where we meet exited founders and leaders who are turning their transition into purpose and into impact. In today's special episode, we are turning our focus to Next Mountain's co-founder, Nathalia Del Moral Fleury. Nathalia is a regenerative economist, former senior executive, coach, and facilitator committed to transforming leadership in the face of the meta crisis. Over the last 2 decades, she has led teams of hundreds of individuals through complex group transformation, co-created Manage and Impact Investment Fund, and mentored emerging leaders in the field. A true catalyst for creativity and collaboration, Nathalia thrives at the intersection of strategy, innovation, and social impact. Her experience living, studying, and working in Latin America, North America, and Europe has shaped a deep commitment to place-based investing and bridging divides to create systemic change. In this episode, we will explore Nathalia's journey from her beginnings in Mexico to her leadership roles in the corporate world to navigating her own post-exit challenge, culminating to the vision for Next Mountain. Without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Nathalia.
Hi, Marie-France.
Yes, well, welcome to Next Mountain.
Thank you.
As a gift to our audience, and people want to know more about you, we've decided to do a focus on you and your story and your thoughts so people can get to know you better and understand some of your story, the philosophy or approach that informs the work we do at Next Mountain. So anything else you want to add?
Well, that I'm also looking forward to the next one we're going to record, which is going to be about you. So
Yes.
just an introduction to share to the audience why Next Mountain, who's behind Next Mountain, what's our vision, and how are we aiming to bring it to the world. So yeah. So, thank you,
Great.
Marie-France.
So
Let's have fun.
yes. So for the audience who might not know you, can you maybe we start at the beginning and give us an idea of your background, and then we could go into some of the major pivots in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So born in Mexico, I have 3 passports, Canadian, French, and Mexican. I've lived in these 3 countries and about 6, 7 cities, but chosen Montreal. So in the past 15 years, I've been living in Montreal. I'm born, my father is an entrepreneur and in the food business, mostly coffee, restaurants, very passionate. And my mom is a writer and a teacher. And so I started working in Mexico. So I've always been an artist, and I wish I would have been brave enough to just do that in my life. But I've come back to art through coaching. We'll speak about that a bit later on. But so an artist at heart, and decided to study design and started my career as an entrepreneur. Founded a design boutique with my best friend, and it was so much fun. And we had clients in Mexico, mostly in the food industry. Red Bull, Coca-Cola, large companies. And for a few years with it, mostly that developed branding, websites. And I just fell in love with business as a vehicle. And looking back, I think I'm a learner, right? I always want to learn. And also maybe growing up in Mexico as a woman, I think I was also seeking some kind of safety, figuring out the minimum basic, of a Maslow pyramid, like how can I make sure I can pay rent and maybe not depend on anyone else to do it. So seeking always that, they were kind of my motivators in my early years. So how to continuously learn and develop this safe base for me. And so building a company was a way to do that. But then soon I felt out of depth. And so I went to study a master's, went to Vancouver, UBC, and then fell into the big corporate world a bit because it was the opposite. I wanted to try the opposite and continue to learn. So what is these big companies? What do they do? What can I learn there? And worked at L'Oréal and worked eventually at Cobb, which is a French cosmetics brand. It's a family-owned business. And I was there for 7 years. And it was a wonderful school for many, many things.
So maybe I know a bit the story, so I'm not going to lead you too much, but maybe tell us a bit about the journey in Yves Rocher, which I know you really quickly were promoted to leadership roles. So how did that happen? What were the essential components of that ascension?
Journey, yeah. First, at Yves Rocher, I felt at home. I think it's the values fit mine, but also it's a warm business in the sense. It's a family business. You feel it. People are nice, they're caring. And so I was just able to be myself. And I think I brought a lot of value being an expert in marketing. It's something that was needed. And I was the right hand of who was at the time the general manager. And in our journeys, we also always have a lot of people cheering for us and helping us. And in this case, this happened. I was 32 and I was promoted general manager of the subsidiary for Canada and the US. So it was 450 employees, about 60 stores. The business was 60-year-olds in general, but here it was about 30-year-olds for a business that was in transition with a lot of challenges. And it was a wonderful opportunity, which at first I didn't really want. I was like, what? No. But once offered, I was like, oh, I can't say no now. And so I took the challenge, being really young. And that's when I had a first contact with coaching, because my boss at the time recommended I seek, support. And that's how, I became the youngest general manager and one of the first females too, at this company.
And you mentioned you got your first contact with coaching. Tell us more. What happened?
Yeah, well, I was so again really young. I was managing a team of people that were experts in their fields, senior, and so I was trying to figure out what's my leadership style, what am I here to do, how when you're leading an organization, the outcomes are very indirect. So, you're not sure the impact of what you do down the line, right? And so you have to have a clear vision of what is it that you bring, and how will you know that you're doing a good job. And so I met this great coach, and for about 6 months, he coached me into finding my own style of leadership and really owning my role and what was I here to do in this phase as a CEO at Ivochet. And through that experience, I discovered my management style was very coach like. And perhaps it's because I was really young and I was managing people that were senior and had more expertise. And so, no point in telling them what to do. They were so brilliant. But yes, in coaching them to be their best self and being confident and allowing themselves to take risks and, say when they thought something was wrong or, have that psychological safety that makes high performing teams. Yeah.
And so then through that process, what were some of the elements that led to, maybe making a pivot or trying to be concerned about bigger things than just managing P&L and performance and things like that? Like, what were some of those wake up calls for you?
So Ivochet was a school for business management for sure, but it was definitely a great school for impact measurement and sustainability as a whole. It's been part of the mission of that company since its beginning. They are very connected to the land. They own land. They are great cosmetics, but they also grow flowers and ingredients and they use those in their formulas. And I used to say my blood turned green because it became a topic of interest. And then I started with small individual actions. And then when you get to the point of doing everything you can, then you look at the system as a whole and you try to understand um, what's happening in the world with a bit more depth. And more importantly, as a manager, when you take so many decisions every day and you see the impact through the P&L, but you don't see necessarily how your business impacts the world. Outside of that, I was intuitively called to understand with more depth what was the impact of those decisions I was taking every day of the lives of people, but also non-humans and our nature and all of that. And so I implemented all that I could through just my own learning here, but then eventually it wasn't enough. And so I decided to study a second master's in regeneration or ecological economics. We can call it as well. So in the UK in Schumacher, I studied this master, and then my world completely flipped.
Mm.
When you study what's happening from really close, you're really challenged, and it's also a challenge on how to see how we live, how we see life, the perspective we have on how to be on this earth.
You told me the story that you had to engage also the group. The group was engaged in becoming for mission. I don't
Yes.
know how you call it, certification or that
Yes, yes,
process.
yes, yes. So La Loi Pacte in France. So Brice Rocher was a pioneer and partner with the government, and they helped develop this Loi Pacte, which allows for private companies to have in their bylaws a social or ecological mission, and it's audited by the state. And so since I had been such an activist internally on how we continue to improve our strategies and our ways in which we had positive impact, well, I was called by Monsieur Rocher to be part of the governing committee and to understand what is it to have a social mission? How do you measure that? It can be quite complex. And then manage the process of implementing it in the organization and living the process of the audit, the state.
So what gets audited?
Well, what are you like? What's the mission first? And the logic, like the philosophy. It's a French company, so we worked with philosophers, and it was super interesting to really go into the depth of like what is it. So the mission was help communities reconnect to nature. And so what does it mean to reconnect to nature, really? How will you know that you've achieved it? Well, it turns out it's not the same in China, Mexico, or like the relationship to nature is different based on your culture. For some people, it could be putting your hands in the soil, but for others, it can be go hiking or, having plants, whatever. It's very different. And then how does the business model enter into play? Is it really in service of the mission or not? And that was key in that audit. And then everything that connected to that. So if nature is something we want to be reconnecting to, how is our behavior aligned with that and coherent with that? So if we are agricultures, how does that mean? How do we take care of the soil
Right.
and stuff like that?
And so would you say that process also played a part in your transition after towards, wanting in one way or another to play an active role through that master's degree you were doing and through the further work you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it became clear eventually that this was not enough. And also that this was not for me. Because
Mm.
there's great people at Groupe Rocher doing the work now of, implementing this roadmap. And it's a journey that will take years. But I'm more of an iconoclast or a bit of a, I like to point to the things we can improve and and I had done, I think, everything I could in that organization. They were on this path that was going to take, 10, 15 years. But you're very limited as a business in terms of what you can do in the system that we've designed, so our economy and how it works, right? And so I was called to take a step back and look at the bigger system and say like, okay, what else can be done? Is it within business? Is it outside of business? What are the levers of change? And how can I play a role in that? Helping one company achieve this was not enough for me.
So maybe we could go a little more into regenerative economics or ecological economics, as a segue to talk about those ideas generally. So how did doing that second master impact you, and how did that change your view, change how you felt about your role in playing that? So how would you say it?
Well, first I went into it thinking, it's going to be life cycle assessment and a bit like what we know about ecology. And then first class, so it was COVID, so we were online. In that class there was the cook, there was the gardener, everyone in the community of the school was present with the same level of authority or importance, if you might say. And I just felt, okay, here there's something very different. And it felt very nice from the beginning, but it was a big shift and how to be, how to show up, and how to see value. So that word regeneration is such a weird word, and it's a very complex or complicated concept to express, but it really comes from being cyclical, honoring that we want to create conditions for life to flourish again and again. And so it's much more than just understanding, nature and ecology and how it works and how we are in relationship to nature as humans. It's the bigger picture. If how we are part of nature and we live in cycles and in honoring that, right? So that master's was really a shift in how I see the world. And if you are like me and, you've grown on this earth, probably more in the West, right? This is more of a West worldview since the, Enlightenment and Newton's physics and social Darwinism and the Industrial Revolution. All of these movements have shaped the mindset we have now, which is scholars call it the weird worldview, right? So Western, educated, individualistic, rich, and democratic, right? So the society thinks, I would say, has weird ideas. We have weird ideas, which is, the world is maybe a bit as linear. It can be controlled. It has to be efficient. And it's a worldview that has brought so many good things in our lives, right? But right now we've reached the limit of what that can bring. And it's time to take a little bit of a step back and see it more as a whole, which is we are not machines. We're not linear. We're not control. Parts of us are, right? Our cars might be, our watches might be. But if we take a step back, we are complex living beings and we cannot be controlled. And we live in cycles. And so acknowledging really that difference between complex and complicated systems, right? So I love Frédéric Laloux uses a plane versus a bowl of noodles, or Sapolsky uses a watch versus a cloud. The goal is like there's parts on Earth that are mechanistic. They're, controllable, measurable. You can remove a part, change with another part. It's quite simple. You know how to make a plane work. If you compare it to a bowl of noodles or a cloud, you can't remove a part of the cloud and replace it and make it work the same. It's much more complex. And so just acknowledging that as a human and as a larger whole, we are a complex living system with mechanistic parts. And so it might sound simplistic or small as an explanation, but it changes fundamentally how we show up every day.
Well, I think it's one of the in the early on in our conversation, we were like, that was one of the question. What has value that cannot be measured?
Yeah.
Because when we think of what really gives meaning and value to our lives, most of these things cannot be measured. Like, how can you
Yes.
measure the love you have for the people in your life, or your attachment to maybe the land where you live, or the things that make your life rich? So, in that framework of mechanistic versus living, how would you talk about that?
Well, you remind me of Iain McGilchrist,
Mm,
which says, it's not only some things cannot be measured, but in measuring them, you're removing the aliveness from these things, right?
mm,
It's like poetry, um, or a joke. He says, try and explain a joke. It's not funny anymore, right?
right.
So there's things in life that perhaps shouldn't be measured, and there's a way. That's why that taking a step back and you just know a joke is funny, and if
Mm,
it's not, and that's okay. And
right.
so recognizing that, I think, is honoring what's alive in us.
So, you talk about doing that, you were still playing that important leadership role at Yves Rocher. Meanwhile, in the evenings, you were studying about how the world is falling apart.
Yeah. Well,
And then you
yeah, it
told,
was in the UK, so more like 5 a.m., but yes.
yeah, or in the morning. So and then thinking of the people who are listening to us who are maybe coming into a transition since, yourself going from being a senior exec in a big corporation to moving on to a different way of engaging or different conceiving of yourself and your role in the world.
Yeah.
How did that process look like? What did you try?
Yes. Oh my God, what a journey. So first, my calling was because I was looking at the bigger picture, how the world works, and I wanted to play a different role in it. I don't think it's the same for anyone, right? So maybe it's just like this role doesn't fit anymore. I don't know. I accomplished the milestones I had set for myself here, but you start feeling that you're no longer in the right place, right? And that's really how it was for me. So at the end of that cycle, so I left that role thinking, how can I help not one company but many? And how can I push the boundaries of what was limiting me, which shareholders, or what the limits of that business? How can I push that? Maybe be part of the people that were taking decisions, and taking more risks, trying to align really the business model with a positive impact. And so that's when we co-created an impact investment fund, and we deployed it across health and energy. And so at the beginning, we didn't know it was going to be an impact fund. It was all a learning process. But we did our homework, and we understood we wanted to deploy this capital so that we would create something good for the world that would not have been created if we didn't exist. And at the same time, I wanted to be a coach because I had discovered I was good at it. I was naturally really good at it. I enjoyed it, and I wanted to help these entrepreneurs that we were investing in developing their businesses. And so that was the next step. Now I'm saying that, and it sounds kind of like all super organized and like smooth. No, it was not like that. So the first thing is you go from being super responsible, taking thousands of decisions every day. I think I'm not exaggerating. I was COVID too. So like imagine retail during COVID, you're like on like high levels of cortisol, adrenaline, and like opening, closing, opening, closing. What do we do? And so a very challenging phase to empty inbox. And I take a bunch of decisions, but nobody cares. you know, it's just like no one really listens. It's really weird because nothing has fundamentally changed. You're still the same person, yet everything around you has changed. It's really weird. So, so it was a really strange feeling. I definitely had very high levels of I was very driven into, it's a bit of an addiction, right? You're like, go,
The
go, go.
cortisol.
My God, I was able to be on for like so many hours a day, and suddenly I didn't need to be, but I could not enjoy not being on, because then my body was was feeling foggy and like fear and like what's happening. So anyway, just to say, it was not smooth of a transition. It was challenging, a lot of stress, but also it's a period where you can grow so much because you can understand the mechanisms and what drives you and the motivations. And it's a place to allow yourself to ask questions, and take the time to answer them. I skipped too quickly into the fund. I say now we're doing next mountain, and I'm happy. Of course, I'm happy I did everything I did. That's always we're able to reason like that, but it really is a gift you can give yourself to take a moment to think and learn and connect with what you really want and what else can be born, right?
One thing I'd be curious to hear you about, maybe we could take a little segue to talk about the world of what we call conventional impact investing, because like you discovered this whole world of venture capital and everything. So is there anything of note that would be interesting?
Yeah, I would say it's in what I've learned, I guess, is in the transition, probably everything is needed, or like everything happens because it's, so this life. So, but it's true that impact investment is very much still a mechanistic mindset, and you're adding KPIs, but you're not necessarily taking a step back to ask yourself, how is this really transforming the way we are, right? It's a bit replaced. It's a phase of the transition, I guess. And Tom Chi expresses it really well as it's a phase, it's a cycle. Eventually we'll get to true systems change, but you can't really just like leap to that. There needs to be an evolution. And now it's like, what role do you want to play? Because in the present, some people are working on the phase 1, some horizon 1, some people are working on horizon 2, and some are working on horizon 3. So I just want to point to, everything can be good, yet if we all only did impact investment, the problem wouldn't be solved, right? I think what's interesting about VC and impact investment, it's really leveraging the world of entrepreneurship, of creation, to inspire innovation, to think differently, and to create bets, really, because you have to bet on different ways to do certain things. But then it can also be very extractive in how it works. And it doesn't, it's really hard to measure all the externalities. And so if you don't do it completely differently, you're going to continue to create harm. And so that's why because I was seeing it, so we did 6 investments, and they're all extremely useful and important, but it's not enough, right? So what else is needed so that we really embrace a different worldview, and how
Yeah.
in entrepreneurship, in business, and how we show up. And I think it can't be a solution where it's only entrepreneurship, VC, or business. Philanthropy will play a role, the government everyone will play its role, and its roles will continue to.
So interestingly, though, I think you, having played a role, yeah, as a venture capitalist, I guess. How did that inform your view and until the next step into like how you engage with other things, and how did also it maybe connected to your work as a coach?
Yeah. Well, first, I totally failed as a coach, as a VC. Just want to
As a
say that,
VC, yeah.
because the thing is, in coaching, you need vulnerability and authenticity to be part
Mm.
of the relationship. And if the companies still expect that you can deploy money in their company, they might not be super authentic. They might not want to say, where they're failing or struggling. Some do, but it was very difficult to have a coaching relationship with the companies we were invested in, just to say. So I guess that was a bit of a disappointment and a great learning not to have financial relationship design like that. So that was one. Then what else? I think VC. So there is a lot of money being deployed, and I think it's not a math problem, like we've said, Marie-France. I think this is not a matter of like, is there money? And it's more about how do we change, how do we relate to the problem together? What rules can we reinvent one at a
Mm.
time? We
Mm.
can't reinvent everything,
Mm.
From investment, we went to impact investment. That's one reinvention, and there's great ways in which you think of intentionality and the positive impact that companies can have. That already is progress. But then there's so many other things that can be invented. Money money is complicated. Money creates ways of seeing people, tarnishes relationship. It changes it a lot. So how can we use that not as a goal, but as a means? And how can it not change so much how we relate to each other?
Mm.
Yeah. There's so
So
many things that can be reinvented. Yeah.
yeah. So how, like, asking those questions, having engaging and having real life experience being on that side, how did that propel you to, because, you've also worked with think tank and,
Yeah.
as a coach, as a consultant, and working with different organization and and putting together different ways of seeing the economy and seeing people. How would you say that informed your work there?
Yeah. So I asked myself, like, what else can be changed in the system? What other levers, right? And I mean, I love Donella Meadows, and I love her. If you haven't read the article on the 12 system levers she published, I really recommend it. And so, where can I work so that I can push these levers, sorry, and be part of the change, right? And so I contributed in the energy consulting business to see how, because we do need to completely transform how our energy system works. How we deploy capital is one area where we need to completely reinvent ourselves. Great things are being done right now. Then there's the way we perceive ourselves, so regeneration and teaching what that means, how it's a philosophy, it's a practice. How do you embrace complexity in your role, no matter what, at the individual level, a level of our organization, or societal level? There's so many implications of just that. And yeah, so I worked at Dark Matter Labs, which is a think tank that was founded about 10 years ago. And they really are reinventing the way as a society we can function. They're creating a new storytelling about economics,
Mm,
life ennobling economics. So how is it not about, for example, GDP? GDP is a very good example of a reductionist mechanistic measure, right? So it's amazing to know how many goods are traded and at what price, but then it doesn't really care. GDP doesn't really care, our health, how our health is doing, or our forest, or if the communities are thriving. So it's kind of a narrow focus. So it's good. The problem is when we use it as an ultimate measure of economic success, right? So
mm,
it becomes more in the area of chromatistics, with like money accumulation versus like economics as a whole, which is how do we take care of ourselves as society, right? So they're really reinventing a new way of seeing what is important, and done through so many different ways, and projects are so exciting. Like I'd like to invite people to read and see what's being done, because yes, it is maybe R&D at this stage, but a lot of it will become true and is becoming true. So let me give you a few examples. We were working on a air quality biocurrency. So how can a bioregion know, with now technology, the air quality at the time, and develop a currency align with that air quality, so that you trade based on the quality of the infrastructure around you, natural infrastructure around you. And so how can you become richer if the air quality is better, but also if you have behaviors that are aligned with, increasing air quality? And how does that become information for the community also to have discussions around, factories do we want around here, or how do we build, our community and our infrastructure around ourselves? So it's something that might be small, but eventually that could be linked to a different banking system, and a totally different way of relating to each other. Another project that was great was the Cornerstone. Emily Harris, my colleague, did this with many other people. Sorry, Emily, I know you didn't do this by yourself, but so many other wonderful people created this way of going beyond GDP, right? So how will you know what a community thrives on? And so it's a process of listening to the people of
mm,
the community, and the process creates bonds and creates community in itself. But then from that emerges a complex set of criteria that in one criteria include many other, right? So for example, I'm trying to think of a few that I liked in Sweden. One was, how do I feel on the Sunday night before going to work? Right. So that was one
mm,
of the criteria. But then it means if you're feeling Sunday or whatever day before your week work, right? So how do you feel means probably you have a good job, maybe probably well paid, probably you went to school. So it ticks a lot of boxes, right? So it becomes a really rich process. But more importantly, people felt close to this process because they could relate to it, they could understand it, and so it's not as cold and superficial as GDP, and it is built by and for the community. So those are a few small examples, but there's bigger things like how money is deployed, how we can think in bioregions beyond borders, traditional borders, how we can think of resiliency first, with climate change being now putting everything at challenging all the political way we see ourselves and manage ourselves as countries. Yeah.
Wonderful. So maybe this is a good segue into we could talk a little more about our initial meetings of Next Mountain, but one of the projects you had the opportunity to work on as you worked with Dark Matter Labs was the case of Fogo Islands. That could be
Yes.
a good segue into talking about what we do at Next Mountain.
Yeah. Yes. We need more Zita Cobbs. That was the
Yeah.
conclusion of that trip. So
And for people who don't know who is Zeta Cobb, what is Fogo Island?
yeah. Yeah. So Fogo Island is a wonderful Canadian island, far away, they call it. It's on the way to Ireland.
Yeah, in Newfoundland.
Yes, and it's about 12 hours from Montreal, where I am. So it's quite physically disconnected. It's a beautiful place that, in a short amount of time, lived huge. Very recently in the 80s, they didn't have energy, they didn't have money until very recently, and so a lot of things happened on the island on a really short period of time. Energy arrived, money arrived. There was also the cod collapse,
The fishing
and the
industry.
fishing moratorium. So because it is an isolated island, we can really see cycles of what happened, how people react, and economically what that has created on the island. And so we were approached by Shorefast, the foundation of Zita Cobb, to uncover what does a regenerative economics look like, because this seems like a place where this was created. And so that's what we did. And we learned amazing things. Most importantly, Zita and her team developed a process of emergence. Right? She started with art and design and with questions. What do we know? What do we want more of? What do we love? And so she asked the community, and slowly hospitality and art became things that were really alive and present in this community that people wanted to continue to nurture, work on. And so they developed this art residency, beautiful settings where people could go and create on the island, inspired by the beautiful landscape. And one thing led to another. Eventually, she created a hotel that many people know, at least if you're Canadian, you probably heard of, the Fogo Inn. And now what you can see on the island is an example of, it's not perfect, nothing is, but an economy that's based on relationship. It's an economy that's also quite aware of itself. Everyone, had a night at the hotel on the island. And if everything that can be sourced on the island is sourced on the island. And it's just an amazing work that took 15, almost 20 years to build this on the island. And it was really impressive and inspiring. But when we went there, it became clear that Zita's leadership was a key ingredient to the success. Everything was important. The community was important. The vision was important, but her leadership, her presence. And so it became quite obvious to me that entrepreneurs, it's hard being an entrepreneur if you're trying to learn how to have a business for the first time and also having impact for the first time. It's quite the challenge, right? So if you've had a lot of success, like Zita Cobb, who was she was a woman she was born on the island and left to study and became the CFO of Uniface, a very fiber optics company that had a lot of success, was traded on the Toronto Exchange Market. She exited around her fees and was extremely successful. And at that time, she did what we called a legacy turn. So she went back to the island and decided to follow her heart. And that's maybe me projecting, but I think her mission, her heart, what life called from her, which is to do something back at home to help, given the moratorium and the harsh times that people were living on the island, right? And so someone like her that has these skills, this intelligence, this network to bring it to life through honoring that mission, having that clear vision, and this is what I'm here to do, this is what I can help, and putting that to the service of something bigger than her is more of what we need.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So to give a little, again, thinking of our listener, I can speak a little bit more about it, but maybe we could talk about the context that
Next
which
mountain
we
or
met in which
yeah,
we met, and talk about the vision for Next Mountain and how it was born and all of
yep.
that.
Well, maybe I'll try to bring my perspective to it
Yeah,
so it stays
great.
and then you can but so throughout these, past 5 years of transition, right? So from restless kind of where do I help? How what can I do? How can I bring some value? I did so much research in psychology. I got certified as a coach. I did everything you can think of therapy. I mean, the only thing I haven't done is psychedelics, but anyway. So somatic coaching and like a lot of research, a lot of reading to understand a bit more who I am is really selfish, but also just to learn and I guess to connect the dots of how is it that I can bring enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose to life, and understanding the science of happiness behind all of that. And so through that process, it became clear to me that more Zita Cobbs brings more fulfillment and joy, right? So there's a connection there that's very clear. It's when you are able to connect your own nature, when you're able to honor what life asks of you, like Viktor Frankl would say, then you are on that quest of being happier. Happy is not a thing you have and you don't stay happy, but it's a thing you can tend to. And so for me, there's a clear mission here of how can we help people that are struggling, that are open and in a place where there's is a good time to ask yourself those questions and help them find fulfillment so that we solve the biggest problems we have right now on this planet, right? And so for me, that's how we connect all these dots. And so we met Marie-France like a year ago at one of these practicing regeneration evenings we were organizing in Montreal, and Michelle Holliday and I. And we started, I like to say we started dating. They say, I forget the name of the author, but, put the people on the bus and then you figure out where the bus is going.
Exactly.
So anyway, so we found each other and we started dating and figuring out what is life asking of us. And I think, yeah, through aligning our values and understanding where we are in the world and who's around us and what's the calling, emerged the Fogo story and the coaching, and then the story of like let's help exited entrepreneurs like us go through this journey, but in a shorter maybe way, less painful, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's make sure that the potential fully emerges, because the risk is you just jump into doing it all over again, or you don't take the time to build that legacy you're
Mm,
able to do. So it's
mm.
also how can you allow yourself to dream so big. um,
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that, one of the things for me, I've had the great fortune of having some mentors and teachers in my life, and one of my teachers talked often about. You mentioned legacy turn. He called it the boomerang, and he would say that in the first part of your life, your job was to explore externally and conquer the world and see what you're capable of, try everything, explore things, get some accomplishment. And I think a lot of when we talk about entrepreneurs or even like, people who've reached any definition of success that is externally defined, like there's going to be a moment where that's what you call the boomerang, where there's going to be the return, and that your attention going to go back to, okay, but what's inside of me, and who am I really, and what's really important for me. And for me, having both of those perspective, and it's not clear cut, and it's not like, because like it's not like one day this process is finished and then next day now you're moving to this other perspective. But and some areas of your life might be, you might still want to learn how to bake the best chicken in the world until you're 90 years old or whatever, or learn different things. But there is a phase of life which also makes sense in a cycle of a human life, where it's no longer like what's in it for me or what can I get out of the world, but it becomes more like how can I participate, what can I offer, how can I give something of myself, and then that the satisfaction is not from the getting, but actually the meaning of giving. And I think that's the thing that you and I connected on, is really like the question, you say happiness or fulfillment. And I think when we think about the culture where the world, that's a lot of us are feeling this unease that there's this big cycle that's ending, and the cultural messages that we grow up in, is that reaching those markers of success is actually what brings fulfillment. And I think a lot of people, especially when you reach this, you get the house, you get the money, you get the exit, you get the
Hmm.
position, the status. And I think especially people of conscious or people who have self-awareness, they'll have a wake-up call, say, okay, well, I have all this stuff. I reached all the goals. I checked all the boxes. Why am I not fulfilled? Why am I not happy? And I think that wake-up call happens for different people for every, in different ways. But
Hmm.
I think part of what we share in terms of value is understanding that actually fulfillment comes from contributing to something greater than yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and you're reminding me of the Nordic Secret, which is a book written on the concept of increasing the level of consciousness, right? So that there's 5 levels of consciousness, and depending when in your life you'll hit it sooner or later. But Nordic societies, in theory, they have achieved what they've achieved because of the level of consciousness they have achieved because of their education system and this concept of Bildung was a German concept that was brought to them. So anyway, just to say, promoting this time to become conscious, to become more aware, so that you can then find that fulfillment. And then it's all positive, like a virtuous circle, because
Yeah.
your fulfillment is contributes to society and a different story of success, right? Which is the one we have today is not making us happier, right? So the story of accumulation, the story of competition is failing at making us feel fulfilled, happy. And so how do we change that main story of definition of success? How does it become something a bit more like the moral ambition calls it, right? A moral call related to, again, what life asks of you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear from all your studies and also your work as a coach, what have you seen in terms of people getting aligned with that?
Yeah. Well, in all the interviews and research we've done, we've learned that, well, first thing is that humans, as we are, we're not super good at projecting precisely how we're going to feel, right? So we think that the good will be better than it will actually be, right? So, and the bad won't be as bad as we think it will be actually, right? And so, I mean, it's good in the sense that it's because we're so adaptive, right? So the hedonic adaptation makes the enjoyment. For example, you exit and you have freedom, you might have money, you might go on I don't know, you might travel, you might have a lot of pina coladas. I don't know what you'll do. But the idea of what that will be like is better than it will actually be. That's the
Mm,
bad news. Let's put it
yeah.
like that, right? And the thing is, we adapt to the pleasure, so it becomes not enough. That's why it's, that kind of like a treadmill of always wanting more, right?
Mm,
The good side is, whatever horrible thing can happen to you will never be as bad as you think. So that's the other way around it. So exited entrepreneurs, um, they're driven people. Some people argue they're genetically different even. They've had an immense responsibility for a very long time. They're used to being busy. They're used to taking a lot of decisions. They're used to feeling useful, maybe not being at home so much too. And so all of those relationships shift. Like I said, nothing changes. They remain the same person, but yet everything kind of changes, right? So people perceive you differently. Suddenly you have a lot of freedom. Suddenly you're not useful, right? So you don't have an inbox that's full every day, and so that can create pain. And so there's 5 key pillars. We can summarize into 5 pillars that usually are touched in an exit in a person's life, right? So they won't be the same for everyone. Some will have more one or the other, but the first one is identity. So who am I without, the title of founder, entrepreneur? What is left of me? How am I going to be valued? It's well deserved to have this pause, yet these questions will start to pop up and people will ask you a lot. So what's next? So what's next? And that might kind of annoy you. Then the second thing is health and kind of structure and balance, because like I said, you are probably addicted to cortisol and adrenaline. You have had a certain structure, and now all of that kind of goes out. And so how do you develop a structure that serves you in this phase? How do you actually enjoy the time you have. How do you rest? Because you might be exhausted, but sometimes when you rest, then maybe some unprocessed emotions surface, and it's a great moment to be in touch with what's happening. So, physical practices might help, creating new rhythms, and coaching or whatever kind of maybe therapy can serve you. Then the third pillar is money and wealth in general. So money, like I said, is complicated, and people might perceive you differently. You might struggle with the visibility of publicly rich, and you might wonder, how am I not going to spoil my kids? How does that change or not the relationship with my husband or my wife, right? So it's figuring out how you want to be with this new reality, maybe putting some rules in place so you know how to structure your own behavior, boundaries, and then deciding what to do with that, right? So there's wonderful things that can be created. So is it, reframing money as a leverage for systems change or philanthropy or your next business or whatever it might be, right? So taking the time to do that. So we have three, right? So identity and purpose, health and structure, money and wealth. Fourth one is relationships. So all your relationships are changing because first you're changing, you're more time at home. It might be that people don't like that. Or maybe you don't like that. So, how is that, how is if you change, the relationship is changing. So how is the other person, your partner, evolving with you or not? And so that's conversations to be had. Your children, how are they evolving with you? And your friendships. So are you in the same circle, or maybe do you need different circles of people that are going through the same thing or at a different phase in your life? Right. So here again, communication, transparency can help with the kids modeling values, deciding how you walk the talk, designing that for yourself. There's many good ways in which you can turn that positively. And the last one is what we've learned. So many have studied this, is legacy and impact, right? So our lives become fulfilling when we contribute to something bigger than us. Our lives are longer now, so we have time. You might exit in your 40 and you have maybe 40 years to go. So how do you feel that society um, needs you? How do you feel like you're bringing something of value? How can you contribute? And so usually that longing eventually emerges, and you can jump into, I'm going to be a CEO again, a founder again, because that's what I know. But like I said, there's so much out there, so much innovation that's being done. And your skills is needed in so many areas of innovation. And so how can you be maybe curious and exploring what else there is so that you contribute to areas maybe you didn't even know existed when you did your exit?
Wonderful. So, how does that tie? Maybe we could go a little bit more about your methods of coaching or what informs. So, thinking about the one to one coaching, or we call it journeys because some people have negative
Hmm.
associations with the word coaching, but in the
Yeah.
one to one journeys that we offer at Next Mountain, maybe if you want to go a little bit more about the methodology and the way it works and how do you work with the clients.
Yes. So we've developed several products, right? So the one to one, there's a group, but let's speak of mostly the one to one. And I'd like to first say I'm standing on the shoulders of so many great people. And I'll mention a few because I do use their techniques and their frameworks. But one of the things that first makes the approach unique is that it is very multidisciplinary, right? So, like I said, I've read so much about, yes, psychology, but biology, ecology, systems thinking, neuroscience, logotherapy, and all of that, they all have overlap and things in common. And it helps to have a holistic view, really, of how to expand your consciousness and understand you as a human being, how you are a complex living system. And so, really, through these different disciplines, help the emergence of the answers, right? So how you navigate through your life with greater clarity and confidence. So it is a bit of teaching of all of that, and it's a bit of coaching that serves you in your journey. A second thing I would say is it's really focused on founders' mindset. So founders are, like I said, driven, bold, autonomous. They thrive on action. They're fast. And so how can we give them answers and tools that will allow them to go as fast as they can? The process really meets them where they are, and there's still room for the body and whatever else that needs to happen, right? It's not, we're not machines. That's important. But I've noticed that through the coaching I've done with entrepreneurs and exit founders, they get it really quickly and they apply it really quickly. it really helps them grow real fast. Thirdly, I would say very practical. So super embodied. Yes, we can do it on the screen for first time because, it's good to do to make sure we're fit. But then really quickly, can we go and do a walk in nature instead? Because things will change much faster. Trying to get us out of our heads. We're in our heads way too much. Martha Beck calls it the hall of mirrors. And so getting out there and really allowing yourself to be free from society and what you know, and just really listening to what you really want to do, and then
Mm,
honoring the responsibilities and the rest. Like, it's not black and white, but
mm,
that creative practices really do help listen to the truth, to what you really want to need to hear about yourself. And the last time, I would say it's really focused on the life dimensions I mentioned earlier, right? So it touches on your identity, it touches on your inner work, your health, it touches on the concept of legacy, your relationships, and wealth. It's all connected. And so making sure that we cover these is important for you to have success in your exit and live it as a positive journey. So I use a lot of, if I might
yeah.
continue my français,
Yeah, of course.
but I just want to mention a few things. So, for example, I use a lot Martha Beck, which is a really renowned life coach, and she mentions that lies cause a lot of suffering, and
Mm,
that it's not that we lie to others; it's that we even lie to ourselves. So, how can we really take a moment to listen to the truth and doing the work in noticing what happens if you allow that to happen?
mm,
Again, the work of Iain McGilchrist is super inspiring. So, how do you not stay on the left brain vision of the world, which is, how do I accumulate? How do I control? How do I separate to understand? But how do I take a step back and see the holistic view? And, you know, what am I going to be proud of at the end
mm,
of my life? What's important for me? And having that
mm,
holistic relational focus and bringing more beauty, more truth, and more goodness to your
mm,
life.
mm.
Just to give a few examples.
Yeah, and also, one of the ways shortly we described that value of that specific offer is really like to go from achievement to alignment. Like, how do you align those life areas to who you really are and who you're also becoming? Because I think one the thing that's important for people having gone through that process is that it's not instantaneous. It's not like this is the beginning of a new phase of your life. So, and the clarity is going to come from engaging both in your head, but also in your body, and in the type of having a trusted ally, like a coach, like yourself, to be kind of like a sidekick in that journey. So I think that's highly valuable.
Yeah. And I'd say maybe that the journey is, it doesn't start when receive the check, whatever happens, that, it's a milestone. It might start earlier because you might want to plan your exit and think, okay, am I ready or not? Why would I be ready? What's waiting
Mm,
for me around the corner? So there's this moment of taking the decision and making sure it's anchored in meaning. And then when it happens, and then it becomes more of a day-to-day, how do I stick to it? What remains through, given what I'm learning in the process of doing it, right? When you're in action,
yeah.
how can I make sure I explore enough before I take decisions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had a great conversation. I'm curious if there's anything else. Is there anything that's missing or something you would like people to leave with having listened to this conversation?
Well, I guess I'd be curious. I'm thinking maybe some will think, wow, this is not, I'm not Zita Cobb, or this is not for me, and I'm wondering what part of you is that's maybe not letting you be free to explore things. So,
Mm,
I'm just happy that I realize I can help these people, and that this journey is much more fulfilling if it's not done by yourself,
mm,
and that there's so much potential
mm.
that can be created on the ground when people bridge, this from this first mountain to a second or third or fourth, whatever. um, yeah. So to, I guess, let yourself be curious. I
Yeah,
would like to say.
and maybe we can move a little
Yeah.
move into the vision, because one of the things that was really important in our conversation is that we don't want to just do self-help, right? We just don't want to do like, okay, well, we're going to come and we're going to help you. It's going to be like therapy, etc. Is that like Next Mountain as an entity has a purpose that's greater than itself. So maybe if you want to talk about your vision of what Next Mountain can do, that people can join into this vision in one way or
Yeah.
another. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first, no, I'm not a therapist. I'm a certified coach. Yes. And we have so many partners that can help. Yes. Either therapy or, even just with exit transaction and stuff. But beyond that, I struggled so much in getting out of the mechanistic worldview and getting into this systems thinking, kind of like what is possible and how can we be different in the world? It can be painful. There's a big gap, yet it doesn't need to be, because many of us have done the work of figuring out what it means. And so the process of unlearning and of discovering all these wonderful areas of innovations that exist where wonderful things are being done are waiting for you. And so the vision is really to change that mainstream story of success. I hope young people, when they're teenage years, they're developing their own brain and identity. They're thinking of the legacy they can have in the world. They're thinking of contributing to the collective first, right? So I think if everyone did that, the world would be a happier place, but we would be happier too, right? So everyone. So that's a first, changing that story. Second, collectively together, like doing this while we're having fun, like solving big issues because we're helping each other and because we're really untapping our unique potential, right? So how taking the time and supporting each other. So that's why the forum experience is important, so that we can really coach each other as a group and accompany ourselves in that second, third, fourth month and whatever, through a group of people and a community that can do things differently. Hmm. Yeah.
Great, great. Yeah, so thank you so much, Natalia, for this wonderful conversation.
Well, I guess if you want to know more, we publish every week an article about how, what's the transition, this exit like, what's awaiting for you on the corner. So don't hesitate to go and read and see everything that we've learned and then reach out. Yeah.
Yes.
Because let's see if we are a good fit, and Next Mountain is not for everyone, but it might be for you. So
Yes. Okay, well, thank you so much, Natalia, for this wonderful conversation. And
thank you,
yeah.
Marie-France. Looking
Okay.
forward to our next episode.
Okay. Bye.